I've been waiting my entire life for an opportunity at a deer of this caliber. This is the hunt for Sticker 10. The story of Sticker 10 really starts out in 2021. That's when I had the first encounter with this deer. At the time, I was hunting over a late season food source. There was snow on the ground, and he was a 3-year-old at this point. So just a nice, clean 10-pointer, probably in that 130 class. You know, a beautiful looking deer, but not anything that was on the hit list at the time, and really not even a deer that stood out by any means. That next spring, I ended up picking up one of his sheds, again confirming beautiful young deer that I was excited to see what he would turn into in the fall of 2022. Fast forward into the late summer of 2022, running reveals, and a giant shows up on camera. He's in full velvet, and I can tell he's just got a mega frame. At first, I didn't know what deer this was. So after talking to Lance, and looking back at the history and looking at some sheds, we determined that this was that buck that I had an encounter with the year before and picked up his shed that spring. This deer was a giant 5x5, big brow tines, long G4s, and had matching stickers on his right G2. Now this is one of those bucks that you look at and he's a jaw dropper, but a deer that we know is only 4 years old. So we're faced with a decision. You know, do we put this deer on the hit list, or do we try to pass him and let him go another year? Now it might seem crazy, but after hunting this property and knowing the potential and seeing the jump that he made from 3 years old to 4 years old, we're gonna try to let him live and see what he does from 4 years old to 5 years old. You know, I think it comes down to some deer just have it and others don't. You know, you can have mature bucks that get to an old age and never grow a massive frame, but they grow mass, or they throw some junk, or, you know, all deer are just genetically built different. But I do believe when you look at these big, massive frame deer with long tines, some deer just have it. This is one of those deer that I believe just has it. It was gonna be super tough to pass him, but it was gonna be super exciting to see what he could potentially turn into at 5.5. So I set my sights in a different place. In late October, I was fortunate enough to harvest a 5.5-year-old deer that we called Swoops on that same property. Now the decision to pass Sticker 10 is kind of a gamble. You know, collectively as a group, we were all on the same page. But this isn't a giant piece. We have neighbors on all sides of us, and if this deer walks over there in front of one of them, there's no chance he's gonna get the pass. But it goes back to the old adage that if you want to shoot a world-class deer, you have to let him get to that world-class level. This was a gamble that we were all willing to take. Throughout that 2022 season, between the group of us, we had a bunch of encounters with Sticker 10. During the muzzleloader hunt in early December, we had a couple different encounters with Sticker 10. Kyle was hunting over the sliver field, and Mitch was filming him, and they laid down some awesome footage and had a great encounter. Around that same time, Roger was hunting over a primetime plot on the northwest side of the property and had a great encounter with Sticker 10 there as well. Then, to top it all off, I'm hunting with Adam, who has never shot a buck in his life. The goal was to try to get him his first buck. And we're out there sitting over standing beans late in December. Guess who shows up? Sticker 10. Now Adam's got a 10-point crossbow in his hands, and this buck is out there feeding at about 50 yards. A shot that Adam could make. But we talked about it as a group at the start, and we were all in agreement that this buck was gonna get the pass. And being the end of December, it was likely, man, we're gonna get this deer through. This by no means was an easy call by any of us, but you learn lessons as hunters. You learn patience, persistence, all of these things, and being on the same page. I get asked a lot, how does it work with all you guys hunting the same lease together? Well, we've had success because we set those goals on the front end, and we all live by them and agree upon them. This is a perfect example of that. We all set the standard of, hey, we're gonna pass this buck. Everybody upheld it, and Sticker 10 made it through. The season comes to a close, and as far as we know, Sticker 10 made it. But we had a super harsh winter. We had cold temperatures, we had snow, so it was putting a lot of stress on the deer. So it's always that question, is he gonna make it through the winter? Is passing him the year before gonna pay off? Well, fortunately, that next spring, we found both sides off Sticker 10. Lance found one side, Kyle found the other. So now heading into 2023, all focus was on Sticker 10. This season, we had massive changes on this property. The whole entire center went from being CRP to now standing corn. This changed everything. It changed our access, it changed the way that we hunted, and it changed the deer's patterns as a whole. And really, we had to relearn what the deer were doing. We had to hunt it a little differently, and it made what we were gonna do in our off-season planning even that much more important. One of the focuses that we had throughout those summer months was really dialing in our microplot system. So on the north side and in the sliver plot, just really enhancing those microplot systems so that we could hunt these deer more effectively with all that standing food in the middle of the property. Oh, out here at the sliver plot, JJ just came through, got it tilled. We expanded it, added a brand new section, so it's about a half acre now. Got standing corn behind us. This plot is looking sick. Now we're gonna put prime time and then we're gonna do a test blend. So we're early August right now, and this should be killer throughout the entire season. So here we go.
I'm excited to introduce a brand new Deer Society video series called The Art of Deer Hunting. Now within this series, we have categories such as the art of calling, the art of food plots, the art of scent control. We're gonna detail and break down all things in these categories plus more, from trail cameras, stands, scrapes, all things related to successful deer hunting is what this series is all about. This series is a culmination of all the information we've received internally from some of the best deer hunters across the country and the methods they've used to successfully harvest mature whitetails year after year. This is called The Art of Deer Hunting on the Deer Society YouTube channel.
On top of dialing everything else in, we got our reveals out early, and the anticipation was high. Well, sure enough, late summer, Sticker 10 shows back up, alive and bigger than ever. His frame has blown up again. He's now a mainframe 6x6. He's got split brow tines. He's got matching stickers off his G2s, and he's thrown a little pigtail drop tine off of his left side. This deer is a mega, and seeing him in the jump that he has now made from 4 to 5 makes that gamble pay off. As the summer progresses into fall, Sticker 10 is all over the place. The year before, we got pictures of him on the north side, in the middle, on the south side. He was a roamer. He didn't have just one small core area. And that pattern was kind of repeating itself this year. Sticker 10 seems to live kind of right in the middle of the property, but he goes to the north a lot and he goes to the south a lot. So this deer is a roamer. He doesn't have just one core area. And to make it even more difficult, There's standing corn in the entire center. So what we're trying to figure out is he living in the standing corn? Is he living on the north side and traveling all the way to the south side? What is this deer doing? So the strategy here is really running a bunch of reveal cameras, trying to gather as much intel as possible, and trying to understand where this deer is living and what he's doing. You know, one of the most exciting parts was waking up every morning and looking at the reveals and saying, where was sticker 10 last night? And texting Kyle and texting Lance and all of us cross-referencing pictures. It's like, where in the world is this deer? He'd be on the north side at midnight and then be on the south side at 3 in the morning and then back on the north side. He was all over the place. But the hard part was early, this deer was so unpredictable at this point that he was going to be tough to hunt. Overall, the strategy was to kind of stay out until sticker 10 gave us a window to go in there and kill him. There was no point in going in to just hunt him. The deer lived there, but he was unpredictable. So we were just waiting for the right window or for him to do something that said, hey, this is the time to go in and be surgical in hunting this deer. Towards mid to late October, it was apparent from the reveals that this deer had started to settle into the northwest side of the property. He was there more regularly all the time, still at night, but just there more regularly and less on the south side of the property. Now, looking back at the year previous, this deer was kind of doing the same thing. I think he was getting ready for the rut, and I think those big deer habitually do those similar things year after year. They know where those first does come in, they know where they want to take them, and they'll do that year after year. So I think this deer was settling in to that pre-rut rut area, and that just happened to be in that north section of the property. Now, I think where this big deer was living was in this big section of timber, and one that we never go in. This is a sanctuary that we go in one time a year to shed hunt, and that's it. We'll hunt either side of it, but never go in those woods during the fall. This sanctuary is big, but it lays out like a big drainage, basically. I spent a lot of time studying onX to try to figure out different routes that this deer could be taking to come and go from where he was living. Now, if this deer was coming out to the north side of that section, we had a few stands in place that we could capitalize on. That was great if we had a south wind, but predominantly this time of year, we have a north wind, and if this deer was coming out the south side of that block of timber, we didn't really have a good stand set up there. So after studying onX and looking at these different routes, I kind of pinpointed a perfect spot for a tree stand that if that deer was coming out the south side, which I knew he eventually would and had to do at some point, that would be the place to capitalize on. So we're moving into late October now, and I waited for a day that was super windy, had some rain, and I slipped in there and hung a Novik set in this big oak tree right where a logging road came out of this drainage, and I thought would be the perfect spot to ambush sticker 10 in the coming weeks. We're coming up on the last weekend in October, and everything was lining up. As we're getting into this time period, another variable. They cut all the corn in the center of the property. So now all that standing corn and cover that there was there is now gone. So again, the game is changing. With this corn in the middle now harvested, 1, it gave us better access, and 2, gave us an advantage from a visual standpoint to understand where these deer were coming out and what they were doing. Sticker 10 seemed to be moving around some more. We were getting into that rut phase now, and we had a cold front coming. So October 28th, I had it picked out on the calendar. I'm like, that is the day that I'm gonna go in there, slip into that stand that I hung, and hunt sticker 10. Well, as you know, I'm not the only one that hunts this property. Lance and Kyle had the opportunity to get out and hunt a few days prior than that, and they took advantage of it. On October 26th, Lance sat in a ground blind on the south side of this big section of timber, but more as an observation sit to see if he could lay eyes on sticker 10 or other deer that were coming out of this section. Sure enough, he has an encounter with sticker 10.
It's hard to see us right now. How's it going?
With all signs pointing to this deer is gonna charge across this field, this deer is engaged and he's coming. But just about that time, a doe runs out over the hill just behind sticker 10, catches his interest, and boom, he's off to the races. So in communicating with Lance, I'm just getting more and more excited. I'd love to see Lance or Kyle shoot this buck, but the exciting part is that he's on his feet now. He's chasing around does. He's moving in daylight hours. You know, my thought process with the stand that I previously hung, that I was planning on hunting coming up, was it was a centralized area where I knew if this deer was on his feet, there was a big scrape there that potentially I could catch him on. Otherwise, if deer were coming out to feed or he was chasing does, this was just a centralized location that I knew eventually he had to come by. Now it's October 28th and that window is here. We have some snow coming in and everything is lining up perfectly. I go in for the evening and jump in that stand that I previously hung. Not long into the sit, I hear some deer chasing below us. And I get a glimpse of a deer just moving through the timber. And it's not sticker 10, but it's a deer we call wide 9. And it's probably the number 2 or 3 buck on the hit list. This is a 5.5-year-old deer and just looks like a boss. He's got a giant body, big head, super massive, wide, and just one of those bucks that you look at and you're like, man, this is a mature bruiser buck. My mind, all in on sticker 10. But I'm looking at this buck and I'm like, man, he is impressive. And in this oak tree, we're not very high off the ground. Maybe 12 feet off the ground. So it's like this deer is in our face. There's some little snow flurries that are floating down. And it's like this deer is in slow motion right now. And I have my bow in my hand and my release on the string. And there's tension there. And then nothing. And I watched him walk through that shooting lane to my right and never drew my bow back. And the second thing I'll never forget is Patrick looks down at me and he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know." And at that moment, it was just like it hit me. As much as I enjoyed looking at Wide 9 and seeing him put on a show, it was like my mind was just all in on sticker 10. And I had so much faith in all of the gamble and the risk that led up to that moment. It was like sticker 10 was the one. Wide 9 was obviously something special and a deer that I would love to see again in the future. I just had so much invested and so much scouting and so much confidence in the plan and the excitement for the potential at chasing a deer like sticker 10, I decided to give Wide 9 the pass. As the evening faded, no sign of sticker 10. But the next morning, I slipped right back into the stand. So now it's October 29th, and I'm headed back to that same tree. Patrick had to go home, so this morning, it was a self-filming situation. It's a cold morning, not a lot of wind. I can come in from the south now, especially with all of the harvested corn, come right across the field and up into the stand. And as it starts to get light, out steps a buck and he's headed out into the field to check these does. Guess who? Sticker 10. He feeds a little bit, but he's on a mission. You can tell he's cruising. He turns and he's making a beeline across the open field now in my direction. I was a wreck. This buck's coming across the field, and there's so much anticipation built up around this exact scenario. I'm rattled, and all I can focus on is getting the camera ready, trying to get my range right, adjusting my sight, and getting ready for the shot. I watched the shot hit him and he takes off back to where he came out. At that moment, 2 years just come flooding back to me. Everything from the pictures to the scouting to all of the sleepless nights, all of the work put in, all of that culminating into this one moment to just have put an arrow into sticker 10 and a lifelong dream is all right now. Oh my God, look at that deer. Look at that buck. Oh my God, my biggest buck by far ever. Look at that deer. I don't even know what to say. I mean, this deer, we put in so much work throughout the whole entire year. For moments like this is a deer that I absolutely have dreamed of my entire life. And we have so much history with them. All of us here were, we had this deer at the top of our hit list, and I'm just fortunate. That's all there is to it. I'm fortunate. This buck is unbelievable. 5.5 years old. Passed him when he was 3.5 late season. Then 4 years old last year, he blew up. I mean, absolutely blew up. We knew the potential that he had, and we all decided to pass him as a group. And 5.5 years old, he showed back up, and what an absolute giant. Mainframe 6x6, he's got all kinds of junk. He's got split brows, a little bit broke off. He's got this little drop tine. What a buck. I mean, this is a deer that I have dreamed of for so long. And I could say that hunters dream of a deer like this. And ever since I was a little boy, I dreamt of a buck like this. And man, I couldn't be more humbled and just proud. There were definitely several keys to this hunt. And the first one is, if you want to harvest a deer of this caliber, you have to let him get to this caliber. There was no guarantee that he was going to make it there, or I was going to have this opportunity. But we took a gamble, we tried to give the deer another year, and it all paid off. The second thing is intel. So using reveal cameras, not only that real-time intel that we were getting that year, but using the intel from past years and that historical data and understanding what those deer did last year and then applying that to this year. Understanding how those deer use the property, how the property lays out, and using that to our advantage in the hunting strategy. Next was being relentless in the pursuit and relentless in scouting. So I was obsessed with trying to understand what this deer was doing and using onX as a tool to be able to scout remotely without putting pressure on the deer and moving in when the time is right. So just being relentless in that pursuit and obsessive when it comes to the scouting. And lastly, the hunt itself, using the phase system and having my scent control dialed in. I hunted this stand 2 days in a row. I was crossing an open field where these deer were using a lot. There was not gonna be second chances when it came to a deer like this. So when I went in there, it was picking the right window, understanding when he was gonna be killable and not pushing it beforehand. And then when I went in there, making sure that I had everything dialed. My scent control was on point, using the phase system, being quiet, being stealthy, and just being overall surgical when that time to hunt him was right, was just icing on the cake and another key to this hunt.
Thanks for watching this Deer Society Hunt Breakdown. Subscribe to the channel for more great educational content to help you become a better hunter, from podcasts to the Art of Deer Hunting series, hunt breakdowns, tips, tactics, and a whole lot more. The Deer Society is all about deer hunting education.